Good afternoon, Rob.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
Here we have the triangle fractions task cards. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure, so this would often be included in the geometry shelves for a typical upper elementary classroom. You could certainly have them in lower elementary. There's an argument because it's an inset, whether it's a metal or wood inset, it could also find a home in a primary classroom. But like I say, my experience mostly in upper elementary, it's a series of really just 4 insets. And those insets mimic what the child is going to see with the first box of constructed triangles. So there's a nice little relationship there between the constructed triangles and this work. And so it is an equilateral triangle that's cut in half, it's cut in thirds, it's cut in fourths. And so it is one of those, when you present it to the child, it's very wide open. Like there really is no other. We would say when we look at it, we could say, okay, there are some examples here that I could show of similarity. So this small equilateral is similar to this large equilateral. There's certainly equivalence work there. Okay, so these 3 are equivalent to these 2, or these 2 are equivalent to these 4. There's also fraction work here because we're representing a whole, a half, a third, and a fourth. So there's lots of different things that we could do with it. So it really is up to the teacher to say, like, okay, how do I want to explore this material on this day? Do I want to talk about fractions? Do I want to talk about equivalences? Do I want to talk about area? So in that way, it's one of those sort of like wide open materials. But often with a wide open material, sort of like the downside of that is, well, then what do we do with it? And what does the child do with it after the presentation? Does the child just go say, like, oh, that was interesting, thank you very much, and then they go off and have snack? Or is there things that they can do with them? So there are going to be children that are like, oh yeah, this is this, can I copy this, can I do this, can I do this? And that's great. And we would certainly, with all task cards, with all command cards, we want to keep in mind that, yeah, this doesn't replace the teacher's presentation. So that all of these, the teacher makes the presentation, does that first period, second period, third period with it. This allows us some more, just more energy towards it, so a little bit more thing that children can do with it. And so the first one is more dealing with the shapes themselves, like identifying all the shapes. Again, very, very common in Montessori. When we have insets, the first thing that we're going to do is, well, what are we looking at? Okay, this is an equilateral triangle. It's made out of isosceles, obtuse-angled isosceles triangles. So the first set deals with this. Here it deals with the concept of congruency. Are these congruent? And they're not. So again, for a child who's never heard the word congruency, it's going to be very, very hard for them to figure out how to do this independently or even spell out the word. But for a child that has had a lesson and the teacher has written congruent and they've talked about, okay, this is the etymology of congruent, well, now they look at this and they're like, oh, I understand what congruency means. It means they have the same shape and they have the same value, so they can go through those cards. And then the last one is more like all the different fractions. So this is 1 whole, this is 1/3 of it. So we can take, because of those fractions, we can take certain pieces out and they can identify them by their fractions, either 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, all the way up to the whole 4/4, and then for thirds, and then also for for halves. So they're also a nice, just a reinforcement of the idea that the whole doesn't have to be a circle. The whole can be any shape, and the fraction just has to follow those 2 rules. Has to be fair. They have to be cut, in equal places. So yeah, a nice way of getting shelf work for something that doesn't necessarily have an obvious work to follow for the child. So yeah, a nice addition to your shelf.
Thank you.